we should have a good 45 minutes to dialogue. And if you want to start to line up, we have a mic over here on the left and one on the right. Try not to just go to one. We can go to either one. And as people are lining up, I'm going to just real quick ask Hugh something. Hugh, if I sit down and watch The Martian or Interstellar with you, is it fun?
No, I watched The Martian.
Oh, you're not on.
I'm not on. I watched The Martian with my two sons, and was busy saying, you cannot grow potatoes on Martian soil. There's 60 times as much sulfur there as here on Earth, and anyone who's doing this little tiny. So you can't walk that fast on Mars. You're going to be stumbling all the way. At most, you can go up 100 yards or so. They said, Dad, please stop telling us. Per minute, this movie is violating the law of physics.
I do the same thing with my sons, and one of them sat me down and said, that's it, Dad. Either we watch a movie all the way through or I'm not watching anymore with you. So we watch them all the way through now, but we still have fun discussing things. Let's go over to this gentleman on my left, who's ever first over here. Someone can choose, and state your name so we have some context there. Phil? Felder, welcome.
So this question is for Dr. Huffington and Dr. Ross. So I was listening to your presentation, great, but I'm still confused about the difference between when you say that the phenomenon is real, but it's not physical. So when I see the Tic Tac video and I see like something in the video and it doesn't give us heat signature, how do we explain that as being real but not physical?
Okay, well, some of these things that are being released from the naval pilots and Air Force pilots, in some cases they are seeing something physical. A fleck of paint goes off and it gives this little image that you see there. Other times they are seeing something that's in the category of a UFO, where it's real but not physical. And real is where we have evidence that it's causing physical effects, but it's violating the laws of physics. So for example, you got these pilots reporting, hey, I saw this object make a sharp right angle turn at 6,000 miles per hour. If a physical object did that, it could be completely shattered into individual atoms and protons and neutrons. The fact that it retained its shape tells us we're dealing with something that's not physical. So if it violates the laws of physics and is real, that puts it in the category of non-physical reality. As I mentioned in my talk, from a Christian worldview perspective, God created two species of intelligent beings. Those that are subject to our laws of physics in the space-time dimensions and those that are not.
Brian, did you have a further comment? It was addressed to you too.
Not much to add to it, except if we're looking at these things that are not military aircraft and not natural, if they really are true UFOs, then yeah, I wouldn't have anything else to add, that they really are behaving in ways that cannot be explained and violate the physical order. Then if they're not, they're either going to be terrestrial, and there's good reasons to think that we don't have that kind of technology, because it's not possible. They're not alien, for what you've already heard. They don't have to be some kind of spiritual beings that can materialize in some regard. So pretty much what Dr. Ross said.
Yeah, but I would add this one thing. If you don't have multiple observers, it's not possible to distinguish between what is real and not real. You do need multiple observers.
Okay, let's go to the right over here.
Gentlemen, thank you for your time tonight. My name is Tommy Poland, and I've got a statement/question. Obviously, I appreciate the conversation, by the way. I think this is very important. I've noticed a trend. I'm a child of the 70s. I was born in 1970, and so my interests have always taken me to the library, to the 00 section, and always went to the UFO and Bigfoot section, and I was curious of what it was. And it seems like from the last several decades, the trend has increased from it's been relegated to the tabloids, to it's made news, and now it's the chuckling has kind of subsided somewhat. The tone's a little more serious. With that being stated, do you see this trend? I really think I see it as kind of as a blind spot for the church, honestly. I think that there is something bigger that's unfolding. I'd like you guys kind of expound upon that a little bit and kind of, talk about maybe how this is playing into the deception a little bit in the last days. Obviously, we don't know when that is going to be, but also kind of maybe speak to how maybe this may be related to part of the apostasy. If it just seems like there's a trend of some sort of what's called the disclosure eventually happening more and more. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I made the comment that I've been to Russia, and I remember in 1990, 50% of the people in my audience said that they had close encounters with these UFOs. I went back in 1994. The Soviets were no longer running the show. The Soviet Union was over, and the percentage plummeted. It was now close to, it was about 10% of the audience that said they had these experiences. What had happened in the meantime? They shut down all the departments of occult physics. So that's why I'm saying you do see a direct correlation. So for example, if you go to equatorial Brazil, much higher percentage of the population claims to have had these encounters. Likewise, parts of France, very high. But other parts of the world, it's very low. There's a direct correlation between the percentage of the population that's involved in the occult and the percentage that are having these kinds of encounters. We even see this here in the US. The state where you see the highest percentage of encounters is Alaska, but it's the same state where you have the highest percentage of the population that's involved in the occult.
Can I add something? Because the idea of this phenomena being legitimate and the church not necessarily taking it seriously, I think it's probably true that the scientific community doesn't take it very seriously either. And there's a really interesting autobiography I read a number of years ago by a scientist by the name of Kary Mullis, and he won the Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology for discovering what's called the polymerase chain reaction. So if you know anything about molecular biology, that's one of the most important methodological breakthroughs in the last quarter century that really paved the way for a lot of what we see happening in molecular biology today. So like the sequencing of the human genome or the sequencing of Neanderthal genomes is all based on this technology that he invented. And interesting guy who did a PhD actually in organic chemistry at Georgia Tech and went to UC Berkeley. This was in the 1960s and began experimenting with LSD. And this was at the time where people were looking at LSD use as a way to expand, mental capabilities. And as a result of that experience, claims to have had out-of-body experiences, claims to have seen UFOs and have had close encounters with UFOs. And for him, these are very real phenomena. And, and he was labeled kind of like this genius kook because of that experience. And in his autobiography, he really takes the scientific community to task about the fact that there is this real phenomena going on that the scientific community has completely shut its eyes to, that completely dismisses. And the net result is you have, shows like Coast to Coast and things like that, where people are going anywhere they can to begin to try to discuss this issue. And so I think the lesson that we take from that is that we have to take this seriously, as a church and treat it as a serious phenomena that needs to be, explained and accounted for.
Brian, did you have a comment on that?
I was going to say, John Mack at Harvard had the same experience with LSD and Near Eastern religions with various things like that. When he got into yoga and these kind of things, he would do all kinds of conferences and surveys on people who are having abduction experiences and LSD and all these kind of things that we see in the East and those kind of Zen and then these kind of meditation would open the door, and they would have a lot of correlations with that as well. In fact, the CIA had some experience with LSD and various things along with trying to figure out how to expand our mental, as you said, our capabilities.
One person said there's a difference between the higher mystics and the high mystics. So we'll go to this gentleman right here. State your name.
My name's Reagan, and it's for you, Dr. Ross.
Make sure you come close to the mic so we can hear. We don't have a monitor.
So, can you hear me, Dr. Ross?
Yes.
Okay, sir. By the way, you're a hero of mine. You explained these UFOs, they can withstand these particles coming through space at such a fast rate without being burned in the atmosphere and not creating sonic booms. Why do they hit the ground and leave an indentation? Why don't they just stop right before that? And if they are not physical but real, why do they leave a physical mark?
Yeah, good question, and it doesn't happen all the time. There are cases where observers see the UFO crashing in the Earth and there's no crater, there's no melted snow, there's no damage. So you get both phenomena. And this is kind of part of the database that tells us, hey, it's something that's not physical. I mean, you were making the comment, Brian, about how you sometimes see it on a radar screen. Well, it's interesting, pilots will see a radar blip, but they see nothing with the naked eye, or the optical camera picks up nothing. So they are now releasing cases where two instruments see it at two different wavelengths. But what you're not seeing is where the object appears across the entire spectrum with all instruments. So the fact that some instruments pick it up and others don't, that's another indication we're dealing with something that is not a physical phenomena. And hey, we're dealing with beings that are not subject to the laws of physics or the space-time dimensions. We can understand why these protons and neutrons aren't going to bother them. They can traverse interstellar space. I mean, these angels, for example, can come into our realm and leave our realm instantaneously, which is why you have people like Jacques Vallée saying we're dealing with interdimensional beings. They're beings that can immediately come into our dimensional realm and just as immediately leave our dimensional realm.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
I think we have a satisfied customer. There we go. Sir.
Hi, my name is Eric Smith. This question is mainly for Hugh. I was thinking about the hazards of interstellar travel, and I was wondering if something like the Alcubierre drive, I think I pronounced that correctly, where the spacecraft isn't so much moving as contracting the space in front of it and expanding the space behind it. Could that be used as a way of getting around those kind of hazards?
Yeah, well, one of my friends, he's now the chairman of the physics department at Baylor University. He actually published a paper with that very proposal, but he calculated the amount of energy that needs to be exploited in order for that phenomenon to be possible. And you actually have to consume the entire mass of Jupiter, converted 100% into energy, E equals mc squared, and you got to do that every second in order to make that possible. So he's basically saying, yeah, mathematically it works, but physically it's impossible.
So possible, logically possible, but not physically.
Well, at least within a reasonable amount of financial investment.
No comment. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Pat Katie, and my question is, this is the first time I've heard of any link between the occult and UFO sightings, so notwithstanding drug-induced hallucinations. Has the scientific community, since the government has sprouted whole departments to look into UFOs, are they all aware, are these entities aware of this correlation between the occult and sightings, or is it just because of your perspective as a Christian leads you to look at something differently, or is this something that's kind of accepted in the scientific community?
You know, excellent question. In our book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, we cite 6 books written by physicists or astronomers who devoted a minimum of 10 years to studying the UFO phenomena. Of the 6, I'm the only one that's a Christian. The other 5 are agnostics or atheists. But where we all agree is that there's a one-to-one correspondence between the UFO phenomena, those that don't have a physical explanation through, whatever, hoaxes, military aircraft, or natural phenomena. There's a correlation between that and the occult or witchcraft, which is interesting. They say whatever is behind these UFOs is the same thing that's behind witchcraft and demonology. Wow. So the fact you're getting that testimony universally from all physicists who have put a minimum of 10 years of study into this, I think is compelling.
That's nice. Thank
I don't know, maybe if Brian can comment on that too. How do you navigate, like being in the Air Force Reserves and that, and having this question raised about demonology? It feels like you could be, sort of pushed
Being
aside.
raised by the Air Force, you mean? Or what?
Well, I mean, just how you navigate this when you're talking with people, because you work from the church to a seminary to you're working with people in the military.
Yeah, it depends. I raised this question to my advisor with my proposal for my thesis. He said, I don't want to go there. But there is the importance of recognizing, and even my interest in it was national security. And he had instances where Valet mentions instances where people are getting involved in these things and they change their allegiance militarily, and they still want to go there. Yeah, it depends on the context. And if you look at the history of the Air Force development, at least from what I've seen, I'm not seeing a lot of people looking at it, at least officially, from that point of view. Most people that I've seen are saying either it's aliens or our own technologies. But there are people, as I look deeper and in other contexts, like Dr. Ross is saying that we're getting this other spiritual aspect of it. Yeah. Interestingly, though, government agencies have, as Fuzz mentioned, trying to tap into kind of a weird LSD, mind control, remote viewing, very new age stuff. Try to use that to our advantage. So they seem to recognize some aspect of the weirdness going on.
Okay, next question.
Deborah Hodges from Lexington, Tennessee. This is a little bit off topic, but it does have to do with possible interdimensional. So at CERN, where they have the Large Hadron Collider, would it be possible physically for them to open a portal into another dimension or a wormhole?
Yeah, I answered that question literally just 2 hours ago with some people not far away from here. And, there's this idea that the CERN, the Large Hadron Collider, is achieving the greatest energy densities we humans have ever encountered. And there's a risk that the people at CERN are going to actually manufacture a mini black hole, which could actually suck in the entire planet Earth, and that'd be the end of our existence. Well, I can assure you that's not going to happen. Why? Because CERN is not the place where we have the greatest contact with the highest energy densities. We astronomers routinely observe objects in other galaxies where the energy density is thousands of times greater than anything that's been achieved or can be achieved at CERN. And no black holes are coming out of those phenomena. So it's not going to give us a window into a new dimension. It's not going to be a wormhole. So nothing to worry about. And as people like Roger Penrose have pointed out, wormholes are great for science fiction. They're even mathematically consistent, but they're physically impossible. If you want a wormhole, you have to have the singularity of one black hole perfectly touching the singularity of a second black hole. Mathematically, that's possible. The probability that they would perfectly touch is zero. The probability would remain stable is zero. And incidentally, you wouldn't want to get close to anything like that anyway, because as you begin to approach the singularity, your body will be stretched out 3 miles long as a single particle string of particles. And as you get towards that singularity, the particles get destroyed. So,
Thank you so much.
Hugh just dashes all my hopes and dreams. Yes, ma'am.
Hi there, my name's Carrie Walton, and I have a question, I guess, for Dr. Ross, but anybody can chime in on this. You had mentioned that there doesn't seem to be much physical evidence, or perhaps no physical evidence at crash sites. But I'm just very curious, because there seems to be testimony that percolates up once in a while from credible people at facilities that say they've seen these things, and there's testimony that crafts have been taken to, like Wright-Patterson or Rudlow Manor or Kapustin Yard, this kind of thing, and that the government has them and they're in fact reverse engineering them. So I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Well, one of the co-authors of our book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, is Dr. Mark Clark, and he's a national security expert. Actually had a position in the Reagan administration. He's now a professor in that area at San Bernardino State University. And what he wrote in Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men, we need to understand that military security, government security is really not up to the task of covering up tangible physical evidence at Roswell or Area 51 or whatever for a very long period of time. It says, look at the evidence. Richard Nixon was able to cover up a 20-minute segment of a single audio tape for only 11 days. The idea that our US government could cover up physical evidence of bodies in a hangar or artifacts, metal artifacts from a UFO craft that crashed into the earth over a period of 50 years, let alone even a week. It said that's not possible. It says, matter of fact, having studied Soviet security at the height of the power of the Soviet Union, they were not up to the task. And that's something I spoke on when I was in the Soviet Union, because there's a lot of speculation that the Soviet government was covering up this evidence. I says, yeah, their security is way better than our security, but it's nowhere near up to the task.
Yes, sir.
Is it me, boss?
Go.
Cool. Hey, my name's Louis Berry, and it's funny, you guys, you stirred up my, first you said you were gonna eat Jupiter, something along that lines, and I got hungry. Then you talked about getting stretched about 3 miles and not eating an air sick bag, so just give me a second. The questions have helped me because when I hear people ask the questions, it helps to formulate the massive amount of thoughts that come into my brain at any given second. I'm spastic. You can probably already tell that because I hadn't put a comma in that sentence right there. I was the youngest of a bunch of very strange people growing up. We all went to the Naval Academy, and because I was the youngest, I had to do things I generally didn't want to do because I was a kid. And so I shot at a lot of physical and tangible things, as you can imagine. And then when I was about 12 or 13, I overheard my dad talking to my sister, two very rational people in my life that I really needed to have instruction from. And both, intelligence and emotional, because my emotions were askew, as you could probably regard in this moment. And they were talking about how my grandfather, Fred T. Berry, who was killed in the USS Akron, struck by lightning, appeared to my mother. And okay, that was weird. And then when I think about your talk and I think about the nature of spirituality, there's only one thing I keep my eyes on, and that's Jesus Christ. I don't care about anything else. I just care about the man, the God, the Spirit. And so when I think about, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit nervous. Yeah, but super important, and I appreciate it. Paintings or references to people speculating the Bible of appearance of spirits and of other cultures worshiping. Does it not sound like the powers and principalities from Ephesians? And Jesus Christ and UFOs and aliens and this is where my train of thought is going this whole time, is it not possible that writings on caves and objects drawn in the sky, and they're not physical, but they're real? They sometimes leave a mark or they don't. And they're doing 90-degree angles, which would shatter, human physiology. Could it be Jesus Christ, Father, Son, Spirit, and powers and principalities? And that was a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, well, let me cite 1 John. He said, test the spirits. Don't believe every spirit. Put the spirits to the test to see who they are. And, many have appeared as an angel of light. And he made an interesting observation. These angelic beings can appear in whatever form they choose. So they can appear as a leprechaun. They can appear as a slow-moving dirigible, like you described. They can appear as a flying saucer, a Foo Fighter, or a spaceship moving at 25,000 miles per hour. They can appear as a stone. They can appear as an animal. They can also appear as your dead grandfather. And so when you hear people saying, yeah, I got a visit from my dead relative. Well, the dead in Christ or the dead that are not in Christ cannot come back. But angelic beings can take the form. And so many get deceived. And that's why we hear John saying, listen to what they say and put it to the test to see if it matches Scripture. I'll give you a personal example. In 1938, my father got a visit from what he thought was his dead father. And so his dead father was sitting saying, there's going to be a war. Well, I can tell you in 1938, a lot of people knew a war was coming. But he actually told my dad a lot of things that was going to happen in the war, and all those things were being fulfilled. And the last thing he saw before his, quote, dead father immediately disappeared from his view, he said, son, if anybody tells you there's anything like eternal life, don't believe him. I'm here to tell you there's no such thing as eternal life. And I remember when my dad shared that story later in his life, I said, Dad, do you realize the illogic of what you're hearing? If you really believe that this is your dead father, then there is such a thing as eternal life. And the fact that he said there's no such thing as eternal life tells you it can't be. So you kind of put two and two together. But it shows you the power of demonic deception. It took him 30 years to realize he was being deceived by the Spirit. By the way, in his late 70s, he did come to faith in Jesus Christ.
Amen.
It also shows you the power because his mother was deeply involved in the occult. And that can influence not only her, but also her children. And so it took him a long time to break that link.
Thank you very much. My apologies for the audience.
No, thank you. Thank you. Does this mean also that demons don't use logic well?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
They need to take a course from you in philosophy and a course
Take it from Brian
in philosophy.
There's doctrines of demons. I guess there's logic of demons too, and it's not very good. All right, let's go to this gentleman.
You were saying space travel was not physically possible, Hugh. But back if I'd asked you about the space travel and to going to the moon, going to things that we see, cars going 200 miles an hour, that wouldn't have seemed utterly impossible. But with the current technology we got, we can go to the moon. We can travel 200-300 miles an hour with cars, 600, 700, maybe 10, 15,000 miles per hour, depending on, the space center. So why can't we have the technology maybe eventually to actually do the space travel?
Well, we have to obey the laws of physics. So, you can have amazing technology and a lot of funding. And we just heard, hey, there is a way to go faster than the velocity of light, but you have to consume the mass of Jupiter every second in order to get a 10-ton spaceship to go a little bit faster than the velocity of light. So you do have these possibilities that physicists work out, but we realize it's not reasonable. In fact, NASA is now coming around to the fact we're probably not going to be able to send human beings to Mars. Yes, we can send them to the moon. Why we can make the moon work is that halfway across, you get protected by Earth's magnetosphere. And the astronauts, when they went to the moon, they were only outside of Earth's magnetosphere for a maximum of 3 or 4 days. That's not enough to kill you. But if you're trying to go to Mars, you're going to be outside of Earth's magnetosphere for months. And they've done experiments on mice and rats. And that's a good human proxy because their digestive tract is almost identical to the digestive tract of human beings. And what they discovered is outside of the magnetosphere, the digestive tract of those mice and rats gets destroyed in 3 months. And if you wait 6 months, you get so many cancerous tumors that the mouse and the rat dies. And you say, well, maybe we can have a spaceship with an artificial magnetosphere around it. It's got to be stable. And we've actually calculated how big your spaceship must be, because you're not going to be able to stabilize it electromagnetically or with laser light, but you can stabilize it with gravity. Okay, what's the minimum gravity you need? Well, you need to have a spaceship that's at least 2/3 the diameter of the moon. So now, that's not out of the realm of physical possibility. If you watch the Star Wars series, they had that Death Star, right? So we can go to Mars, but we're going to have to transport astronauts, and it's something about the size of a Death Star. So that means the price tag goes up a bit. And what I've been saying to my astronomer friends, we can learn so much more by sending machines. There is no value to sending people to Mars. And we send people to Mars, are probably not bringing them back alive. In In fact, they'll probably be dead before they get to Mars. So let's send machines. It's way cheaper, and you can learn way more and a lot faster. And that's also what we're learning. Yes, it's now technologically feasible to go to the planet orbiting the nearest star, but we're going to be restricted to sending spaceships no bigger than 10 centimeters across.
All right, thanks for blowing Star Trek for me.
I warned you. All your hopes and dreams. No, that's an interesting theme, though. It could sound, someone's filter could sound like, well, you're kind of a hopes and dreams killer in this sense, right? You're like squelching creativity and exploration in that. But I don't think that's what you mean. Like you just said, let's send spaceships. Is there a way to navigate that sort of, that impulse? Like it feels like you're taking things away from us. You're not really giving something in return. Does that make sense?
I've spoken at both NASA Houston and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Houston, they want to send people to do all exploration. JPL is all about sending machines. And the JPL people that I know, a lot of them attend the class I teach. They're basically saying we can do the job of people for 0.01% of the cost. So if you're a taxpayer, you're going to want to support the Jet Propulsion Laboratory as opposed to NASA Houston.
My son works there, so he'll have a job still. That's good. Let's go over to the show. Oh, what did I miss? We go to the right. Thank you for the accountability.
You can't break the laws of physics, Captain. That's what I hear you saying, Dr. Ross. Hi, I'm Scott Walton. My question is...
Can you get closer to the microphone?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
My question is for Dr. Ross. It's also about space travel. You said that a ship, even going 10% of the speed of light, would undergo damage. And I was wondering, what are the types and mechanisms of that damage? Is it friction? Are there micrometeor collisions? What other, how would you describe those at a physical level?
Right. Well, in interstellar space, you've got particles like protons, neutrons, and electrons and gamma rays. You also have dust. Now, most of the dust is microdust. But the last time they went up to do a repair on the Hubble Space Telescope, they found holes in the Hubble Space Telescope that were as big as the silver dollars. And if you've got a microdust moving at, say, 10% the velocity of light, it's going to make a hole in a plate of steel about that size. So that's one reason why they said we got to put the James Webb Space Telescope farther away, because in a near-Earth orbit, you're going to have a lot more microdust from interstellar space than you would if you're a million miles away. And they want the James Webb to last a while. And that's one reason why that sun shield has 5 layers, because they know those layers will get damaged. Just from the particles and the microdust. But they actually have them angled in such a way so they get a hole in one, it's not going to line up with a hole in the other one, and therefore they're going to have a reasonably long lifespan. So it just kind of tells you that outer space is not a safe place. I can quote Neil deGrasse Tyson. He basically says outer space is out to kill us.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Hostile environment.
Sorry, this question's for Dr. Rana. You alluded to the fact earlier with carbon, and I'm sorry, I'm going to be a little bit technical here, that carbon has handedness. It's chiral. You can have S or R, and in the case of things like amino acids, D or L. Now, one of the major theories I'm reading about talks about the idea that how did we get the handedness of carbon, D and L amino acids, predominantly L amino acids, if not from a creator? And so one of the theories that's out there right now is that you actually had this kind of the silicon bowl that had some handedness to it, and that was actually chiral. And then you got carbon atoms in this soup that kind of combined in the soup of the silicon bowl. And because the silicon had some handedness to it, some chirality to it, that influenced the chirality of the carbon atoms. And that's where we got the L amino acids from. Would you comment on that? How likely is that? What are the weaknesses of that position?
And could you translate that?
Yeah.
And Professor, you should say what your background is to let us know.
Sorry. I should give my name. Jake Plummer. I'm a PhD in organic chemistry.
Okay. Yeah, I've not heard specifically that silicon bowl idea. But I would suspect that you're probably not going to have pure silicon in an early Earth environment. It's probably going to be silicon dioxide. But I am familiar with the idea that there would be, for example, mineral surfaces that would have local regions that had a chirality to them or a handedness to them, and that could actually catalyze the formation or the enrichment of one, mirror image relative to the other. But in those experiments, the chiral enrichment that you get is not very extensive. Even under the most ideal conditions, you're looking at about a 10 or 15% chiral enrichment that just simply isn't going to be sufficient, because you need 100% chiral enrichment for biochemistry to work. So it's an interesting idea that gives you, some movement towards chirality, but it's not sufficient.
Yeah, and Fuzz and I were at an Origin of Life research conference where a whole day was devoted to the homochirality problem. And it was a team from MIT said that the best we can come up with, and this is where they were taking ideas like you were saying, hey, let's get a mineral surface here and let's irradiate it with circularly polarized ultraviolet light. That's another way to get past the 10 to 15% limit. They got as high as 79% left-handedness and 21% right-handedness on the amino acids. But what they were pointing out is that all these experiments they were doing, you're basically destroying the right-handed ones more efficiently than the left-handed ones. And they said, as we get to 79%, what we see is that if you extrapolate towards 90, you've got no sample left. You basically, no matter how big a sample of amino acids you start with, you'll have none left. You will not ever achieve 100% homochirality. And the papers are all published, so I think we can give you the citations if you need them.
Right. And one other quick point, that the most promising, from a chemical standpoint, the most promising way to attain homochirality, near 100%, would be something known as asymmetric autocatalysis. And this was something that a chemist named R.F. Frank speculated on and developed theoretical models. And there's only one example of that kind of reaction that has been discovered since the 1950s when this was proposed. And that's something known as the soy reaction, developed by a Japanese chemist. But it's a reaction that is involving molecules that would be irrelevant to the origin of life. So that would be the only real hope, but nobody knows of an example of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question. I didn't understand it, but I talked to Professor Plemmer earlier. Hopefully he'll join the scholar community. Yes, sir.
My name is Tenney Washington, and I'm a programmer. This is a question for any of you three. So there are activities that I do to decompress that I really enjoy. So you talked about closing the doors to the occult, but some of these activities are frowned upon in various Christian circles, like playing Dungeons and Dragons or reading fantasy series like Harry Potter or doing yoga. How do you define where the line is to the occult so that in trying to please Jesus, you can steer clear of it?
Well, I'll give a start and then maybe you can jump in. Is that, what you see, the promise of the occult is that we will give you power, but you have to relinquish truth to get that power. And what you see from the Christian perspective is the priorities on truth over power. And so anything where you're trying to seek any kind of abnormal or supernatural powers, you run the risk of making contact with a demon, a fallen angel, that is more than happy to give you that power. But there's deception that goes with that power. And you say, well, where do we draw the line? The line is basically drawn at trying to gain that power, whether it be through taking LSD to get some kind of experience that's not possible otherwise, or through Ouija boards, or some occult instrument, or through transcendental meditation, where you meditate on the name of a Hindu god. But that's the common denominator, where the human contactee is tempted to, hey, I'm going to offer you this power, but it always comes with a price.
Thank you.
Brian, you have some comments on that?
Yeah, I think that it's almost that the fallacy of the beard where you don't know where to line, but you can tell one extreme from the other. Anything I think that tries to fill the void of true spirituality, what Christ and the Word tells us, is going to get us in that direction. There are some cases probably where you can see Christians, and we have heard of Christians who have had experiences with UFOs. And what he said, this is what one reason I didn't know why the demon explanation at one time, what their motivation would be. But he said, I saw this thing, and it was a real faith shaker. And so it's also possible, I believe, that demons can attack people or dangle something out there for people who, for whatever reason, are possibly swayed from their faith. People who might think that, well, if there are aliens, then Christianity can't be true, or this is going on, this can't be true. Would you agree with that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So there probably is not a clear line as to, well, this is and this isn't. But anything that's going to, in any regard, take us away from what the Word teaches and what Christ teaches and tries to fill that void, or even if we're just open in some regard, and then there's this curiosity that says, well, maybe I can try this. And it's so seductive. We can just do this and then do this and then do this. And I've heard people playing with Ouija boards and then seeing what they recall as demons and various things. So the danger is, well, I can do this and get away with it. I can do this and get away with it. And then we're gone. Would you find that pretty much to be the case? Yeah.
As you read a lot of comic books, you have interest in, and those go into some various areas like that. What's your answer to the gentleman's question?
No, I mean, I think Hugh and Brian gave a really good answer. I don't know that I have anything
Fair enough.
substance to add.
Fair enough. We're running out of time, so we're going to go into a lightning round right now. So if we can ask them as quickly, I think we can get through everyone if we go fairly quickly. Yes, sir.
Chris Claggett, physician. My question is for Dr. Rana.
Coming to the mic a little bit closer. Thank you.
Dr. Ross's answer to the other question on interstellar travel made mine almost moot, but I read a number of years ago that there's just the natural radioactivity, radioisotopes in the body, like potassium, I think 40, would over time destroy the body. Dr. Rana, could you comment on that? Is something I read a number of years ago. Is that correct?
And that is something that really limits the possibility of life surviving through interstellar travel, even microorganisms, because one idea that's becoming pretty commonplace among origin of life researchers is the prospect of panspermia, where life comes from some other location and seeds, Earth. And that the origin of life is really the arrival of life on Earth. And so people have speculated on the prospects of maybe microorganisms traveling through interstellar space associated with, large enough objects that they would be embedded in the interior, that they would be protected from, the high energy environment of interstellar space. But the problem with that model is, again, the radioactive decay that would be present from the potassium-40 and other naturally occurring radioactive isotopes, that over time, that cumulative damage would destroy life forms. So the same thing would apply to human beings. But it's a real problem that limits interstellar travel.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Robert. I'm from the northern Rockies. Dr. Ross, you mentioned we couldn't go to Mars. I say we send Putin up there and see how it goes, but that's not my question. So
I'm glad.
My daughter is friends with a lot of people who describe themselves as witches. So I've interviewed them at great length. And I said, you worship Satan. No, they don't believe in Satan. So they think the universe is alive. There's some, physics evidence for that. The double-blind experiments, how does that molecule know we're looking at it? I think even Jesus said, if you shut me up, the stones will cry out. Mm-hmm. So is there a way, I guess, is there a neutral way where they could be looking at the future or some kind of events, astrology or whatever, that does not involve some evil, rather involves like a weatherman looking at the weather, for example, without calling on spirits? Is there some way that could happen? Or I think I'm hearing you guys say, no, it's evil-based, it's from Satan.
Well, the reason we're saying it's evil-based is when you look at the people who've had these close encounters with UFOs, it's never a benign experience. It's always harmful, and there's also the deception. I mean, you heard Brian mention, they keep pace with our technology. So 150 years ago, they were slow-moving dirigibles in the atmosphere. World War II, they were the Foo Fighters, moving at the speed of sound. Now they're moving as fast as our spaceships. The other evidence for deception you see, 150 years ago, they said, we're beings from the backside of the moon. Well, when the general lay public realized that's not possible, they changed their story and said, well, we're from Venus. And when people realized how hot it was on the surface of Venus, they said, we're from Mars. And now they're saying that they're from another planetary system. So the fact that they keep changing their science and they keep changing the way they appear is indication that they have a deceptive motive. And particularly when they're giving written communications to the human contactees, 100% of it is focused on denying the deity of Jesus Christ. So there again is evidence of what their real motive is, which is why at least those of us who are Christian believers say we're dealing with the fallen angels. And I find it interesting, even the non-Christians who devoted a minimum of a decade of research to this are saying, yeah, there's a one-to-one correspondence to what we see in witchcraft, the occult, and demonology, and what we see in this residual UFO phenomena. By residual, I mean the phenomena that doesn't have a natural explanation, military activity, or a hoax. And incidentally, about 30% of what I've experienced, they're hoaxes. There's a lot of hoaxes going on. Pardon me? Astrology.
Yeah, would that be in that same?
Yes, for example, I knew an individual was having these encounters, and it was all because of his contact with astrology. Now, having said that, there's a lot of astrology where no demons are involved. But there again, it's not worth taking the risk. Some astrologers actually are partnered with a fallen angel.
All right, let's be quick. We have two more, and we'll respect your time here.
My lightning part. I think everything I've heard here is yes. So I agree with what I hear. I believe that the basic approach that I have is that I agree that the Bible is not a science book, but in my opinion, it's an eyewitness account of how things happen from in the beginning in John 1. So the question is this: Ezekiel talks about the wheel and a wheel, and if I remember right, it speaks of the seraphim and cherubim before the throne of God, and they are moving forward, moving backwards, moving sideways. And the example we had there, I think, talks about right angles pretty much all the time. So I'd like to know your take on the observations of 18,000 mile an hour aircraft making right turns at 18,000 miles an hour. And I see this personally as being an interaction between fields, which gets into the area that's not physical, but it's the activity of energy And that makes impact when it comes down to earth, as you pointed out. So what's your take on seraphim and cherubim traveling at high speeds and right angles?
Okay, Hugh?
Yeah, when you look carefully at Ezekiel 1 and Ezekiel 10, for someone who's taken a course in extra-dimensional mathematics, I'm persuaded that Ezekiel is struggling to describe a phenomena that's multidimensional. I mean, the intersecting wheels, the eyes around the wheels, and then the movements. That's not something that is being described in 3 dimensions of space. I think he's seeing a multidimensional phenomena, and he attributes it to angelic beings. Angelic beings have that capability. And you also see a similar description with John in the book of Revelation. So yeah, there are times where we humans have contact, and it's not just the evil angels, the righteous angels visit us as well. And so at least that's my interpretation of Ezekiel 1 and 10.
So do you see cherubim?
I want to be able to go. You can ask you maybe afterwards, just because I want to respect people's time. So I don't mean to be rude in cutting off. We'll just have the last question, and we'll close up with your takeaway. Thank you.
So in summary, that's no small moon. It's a Martian spaceship. Just to summarize the whole evening, right? All right. My name is Jerry Callison. Dr. Ross, you mentioned that there could not be intelligent life older than humans on Earth. If the life cycle of stars was faster when the universe was younger, then how can we know how many generations of stars there have been in our local environment? And how can we know that there hasn't been enough generations in another part of the universe?
Okay, the rapidity with which stars form and go through their nuclear fuel and shower their ashes into interstellar space, if you change the speed with which that happens, you eliminate the possibility of life. So if stars were to go through their nuclear burning cycle more rapidly, no life would be possible. If it takes more time, no life would be possible. It's part of the fine-tuned features. And by the way, it's necessary to have stars that go through their cycle very quickly and also have stars that take a long time. And you want to have way more stars that take a long time than those that go through their cycle quickly. That's one of the objectives of the James Webb Space Telescope, is to actually observe for the first time the nuclear burning periods and methods of the first formed stars. But I'm predicting it's going to be consistent with what we determine for the universe being able to produce advanced species like ourselves. There is less restriction if you're talking a simple microbe. You got a little more range of constraint.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we've heard a lot of stuff. This is like a really good steak dinner that I couldn't finish. There's a lot there for us. And in my prayer earlier, I asked God, this wouldn't be just mere information, but it would act as transformation in our lives. I would want us to all think about there's so much here. What is your one takeaway for tonight? What is something, you heard a robust discussion on faith and science, incorporating those different areas. What would you take away from this evening? I really want to encourage you to hold on to a nugget. And I'm going to ask our speakers tonight, whether it comes from your talk, here's what you want to leave with people, or maybe it's something you heard from one of the other speakers. What are your one takeaway? What do you want to leave people with, or what did you take away from the evening? So Fuzz, if I could put you on the spot to start, is there a takeaway that you would want us to know, or that you're taking away?
There's, I think, real value in equipping yourself to have a spiritually informed and scientifically informed conversation about UFOs with other people, particularly non-believers, because people are really interested in this phenomena. And, as been mentioned, this phenomena really distorts people's worldview and produces a worldview that takes you away from the Christian faith. But because people are interested in this, if there's a way that you can, again, leverage that interest, it's a great opportunity to have spiritually meaningful conversations that point people towards the gospel.
Use their interest to move them towards that way. Yeah. That's very good. Hugh?
Sure. Well, I think Satan's got two strategies. One is to convince you that nothing supernatural is actually happening, and the other is to convince you it's everywhere, and you have to submit to it. So here in America, I look at this UFO way as a way of basically demonstrating to people who are not believers the supernatural is real, and you need to pay attention to it. And what I saw in Russia, everybody believed the supernatural is real, but they were terrified by it. And so therefore the message was, hey, the supernatural is real, but you do not have to submit to the supernatural power. There's a power that's stronger than what we see here that can deliver you from that fear and help you to have an eternal relationship with the creator of the universe.
Very good. Brian?
Those are both really good answers.
Well, you're the cleanup, so I can.
Right. I guess what I would say is it is so easy for people to get knocked off of what is considered correct and orthodox doctrine. And I'm an example. I used to be in the Word Faith movement. When I was a teenager, I used to follow people who would teach things that are very aberrant. And I can tell you from experience, it is really easy to get sucked into something that's just completely false. So you have to first be aware of what Christianity teaches as true, so that when you see what's false, you know it's false. So we have to know what orthodoxy is and good teaching. So when someone or something tells us Jesus isn't God or isn't divine, we know that that's false. And anything that would take us off track. So we have to know what our faith is. We have to know what we believe and why we believe it. We have to have that strong connection. Not just going to church, not just doing this or that, but knowing cognitively and intellectually and spiritually just what Christianity is, what's important, what are the major teachings, and what are the dangers from these other areas that are coming in, trying to take us away and are becoming so prevalent in our society. Very, very prevalent.
Yeah, very good. And I learned that if I watch a movie with Hugh, we're watching it all the way through first, and then we'll chat about it. Well, we have the conference coming up over the next couple of days. Hugh, you're going to be speaking at this church on Sunday morning, correct? Yes. At all three services. And there are actually going to be different kinds of talks on each one, with the third one, I think, being a full Q&A. So for people who want to participate and be a part of that, that'll be fun as well. So give your mind a little rest tonight and be ready to learn a lot more over the weekend. And I want to thank the church for hosting us, and thank you for coming out and just taking your time in life to invest in this kind of dialogue. And I pray that it goes far in your life. So blessings on your evening. Have good rest.